Tennessee This Week from WATE's 6 on Your Side starts now.
She won her primary and now it is on to November. What's Renee Hoyos' strategy for trying to flip a red seat and make it blue in Congress? From pro wrestler to county mayor, Glenn Jacobs did it. What should his next move be? And wasn't it just election day? So why are we seeing more political ads already? Coming up on Tennessee This Week. Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Mark Mellinger filling in for Kristen Farley today. The Democratic primary for U.S. House District 2 was pretty much a runaway. Renee Hoyos taking 72% of the vote to 23% for Joshua Williams. Next, of course, comes the general election with a chance at a congressional seat that has not opened up in a generation. Joining me now is the Democratic candidate for U.S. House District 2, Renee Hoyos. And Renee, it's very good to have you here with me.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
What did you learn in the primary?
Oh, I learned a lot. You know, running is always good because you learn a lot about your community. And I'd say that I've learned a lot about how the issues impact the folks here in the 2nd District. And then I met just hundreds of wonderful people here.
You have said that a hallmark of this campaign for you in the fall is that you're not going to go negative. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, I want to keep it on the issues. I think everybody's tired of the mudslinging. We saw a lot of that in the primaries. Not so much in my race, but certainly on the Republican side, both in the gubernatorial and in the House race. So I don't want to get to that, but I think the public deserves to know what the candidates think about the issues and the solutions that they're going to offer.
So there will be distinctives and differences. You're just not going to be mudslinging. That's what you're saying.
Right. It's not going to be personal. Or,
right. But you will point out policy differences with Tim Burchett. I mean, you have to, right?
Well, that's true. You got to give people a choice.
So, okay, let's talk about the situation in Tennessee. You know that it is a heavily pro-Trump state. It's a heavily Republican state. So a lot of people would say Renee Hoyos in a conservative district like this is really facing some tough headwinds. Your response?
Well, first of all, we had the lowest voter turnout in the country in 2016. So about 30% of the folks decided who was going to lead us. So I wouldn't say that this state is as red as folks think it is. You look at the Women's March, we had 14,000 people participate. Nashville had 15, Memphis had 11. The Pride Parade had 23,000 people. We have seen the development of groups like Indivisible. Indivisible East Tennessee is the largest, most well-organized indivisible group in the nation. We have more huddles in the 2nd District from the Women's March than in most of the country. So a lot of folks are getting out and getting engaged. The demographics have changed in Maryville and Knox County. I don't think it's quite the same district we thought it was.
So your task then is to get these folks charged up and get them to the polls, is what you're saying. Yeah, I mean,
right.
You think they're here. You think this area is potentially latent with Renee Hoyos voters?
Yeah, and I think they're looking now for an opportunity to vote for something different, and that's what I'm offering.
Well, okay, so in that vein, is there a chance for a Republican crossover in this race?
Oh, there may be. It just remains to be seen. I mean, we'll just see how this administration moves along on its path. I think folks are becoming a little bit unhappy with what they're seeing nationally.
And you do think that what's going on in Washington, and not even necessarily with Congress, although that'll certainly be part of it in a congressional race, but you do think what's going on in the White House could filter down and have an effect on your race?
I think so. I think what we're seeing is we're not getting the promises that were offered during the election. We're not getting the big, beautiful infrastructure bill. We didn't get repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, which I am personally against.
But we have got a strong economy. That's
we do have a
something
strong
you have to
economy.
look at.
Yeah. And so now that we have a strong economy, let's talk about increasing wages. Yeah, because we haven't done that in a long time, and we've got wage stagnation here, so we do need to pay attention to that.
We're getting a good preview here of the Renee Hoyos campaign. Hey, so something else I want to talk about. You said, I am not going to be PAC money in this, or excuse me, I'm not going to accept PAC money in this vein of being a different kind of candidate.
Right.
Why is that so important to you, first of all?
Well, I think we've seen what PAC money can do. We have a congresswoman right now who has taken a lot of pharmaceutical money and then has voted in a manner in which has made the opiate crisis here in this state worse. So I think voters are looking for people with integrity, and not taking PAC money and showing all of my donors, I think, gives them an idea of who's supporting me and what they can count on.
So, okay, if it's not coming from PACs and special interests, Who's it coming from?
It comes from individuals, you know, from the $10 donation to the limit, which is $2,700.
Wow.
It's a lot of those.
You are going to need a lot to fund a campaign. That's for
correct,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some issues. Health care, as you know, your opponent wants to up spending on veterans care and mental care. So let's talk about the Rene Hoyos plan for better care. What does it look like? How do you sell it if you get to Capitol Hill?
Well, I think the Affordable Care Act has good bones. The group market is in pretty good shape, the individual market not so much. And so there are some policy changes we can do. There was a bill introduced in the Senate. It's the Senator Alexander had introduced it and had a lot of the fixes. It's stalled out right now, but I'd like to reintroduce that. I'd like to see Medicare lowered to age 55 with a premium, and then if that seems to work, we can offer it to everyone. We need more consumer choice in the marketplace. And I think there's ways to get it to bring prices down. We also need to have the government negotiate drug pricing. You
know, the hard part of this is you got a deficit that's 20-some trillion dollars. So how the heck do you pay for that?
Well, I think if the government, with Medicare, Medicaid, and the Veterans Administration, was to advocate for lower pricing on drugs, that savings can then be put back into the health system so that we could afford that.
Okay, let's talk about another hot button issue, and that's immigration. Really the issue that Donald Trump, more than any other, built his campaign upon. You know that there's a heavy contingent here in Tennessee that really wants to build that wall. So let me ask, I mean, what's your take on immigration? What's your message to voters here?
Well, I think the wall's a bad idea. It's a lot of money, and we could use that money for other things, for schools, for drinking water plants. We have a lot of infrastructure needs, so the wall's a bad idea. The wall will also not stop immigration issues that people think the wall is going to stop.
Well, okay, so for instance, let's talk about the ICE raid. They got so many people up in arms here in our area. A lot of Democrats have been saying we need to abolish immigration and customs enforcement. Would you be among those?
No.
What do you think about ICE? What do you think about the ICE raid in this area?
Well, the ICE, what I think about it is the owners of that meatpacking plant got no charges, and they violated a lot of labor laws. They also violated a lot of OSHA and environmental laws, and they've been off scot-free, and that's not fair. This separating families at the border, putting children in cages, I mean, that's terrible, and that can't happen. But that was an interpretation of a policy by Jeff Sessions. However, we have always been separating families in this country. We've done it from the beginning. So separating families is something that we should no longer be doing. And that is more of an interpretation of a policy than it is what ICE is doing. In order to stop that, you're going to need to not have Jeff Sessions where he's at.
Okay. Hey, well, let's talk about your background. I mean, you led the Tennessee Clean Water Network for many years, and we are now at a time when environmental regulations, as you well know, are being rolled back. Republicans often say, hey, these are job killers, they're costly to business. So, you know, I guess the question here is, you know, somebody who's been an activist such as yourself, do you advocate for tighter environmental rules even if they do cost businesses in our area?
Well, I don't think they cost businesses in our area. I mean, I think,
okay, explain
that's well, new regulation actually increases ingenuity and entrepreneurship. For example, in this town, we have a number of environmental organizations, environmental engineering, a lot of firms that have made a lot of money, have invested in the economy because they are fulfilling what the regulations that we've imposed on them to protect clean air and clean water. Furthermore, they protect public health. And that's a savings. People don't have asthma. People aren't drinking polluted water. So these things are really important. And I think to say that regulation just kills jobs is not looking at the whole story.
I want to get to one more question here. I mean, you've been meeting voters in the run-up to the primary for a long time now. So, you know, what's something that the voters of the 2nd District don't know about Rene Hoyos that they should?
Oh, wow, what a question. It's always these on-the-spot questions. What's good to know about me that they don't know?
I'm giving you a free shot here.
You are, you know.
I mean, you won't get a better softball than that.
I worked my way through undergrad doing singing telegrams.
Did you really?
I did. I was a drama major.
Hum a few bars for me. Sing a few bars.
I think one was, I dressed up like a carrot, and the song was, "Let us entertain you." And it went on and had all these vegetable puns.
I love it. Asking the tough questions here on Tennessee This Week. Renee Hoyos, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, best wishes. Our panel of pundits is next. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. And we welcome you back to Tennessee This Week. I'm Mark Mellinger in for Kristen Farley today, and it is time to hear from our panel of pundits. Joining me today, WATE 6 on your side healthcare analyst Craig Griffith, WATE 6 on your side political contributor Courtney Piper, and Gary Lowe is with us today, chairman of the Tennessee Conservative Union. Good to have everybody with us. And before we get into the general election matchup, we want to take sort of a larger view. You are all here in the studio listening to the Renee Hoyos interview. All right, what do you think of Renee Hoyos as a candidate? And Courtney, I'm going to start with you.
Well, first I need to disclose that I used to work for the Tennessee Clean Water Network many years ago. So
Craig?
I used to work with Renee.
You also
and
have?
I worked with
Craig has that same
Okay.
disclosure.
And Tim Burchett was is my next door neighbor, and I also contributed to his campaign.
Okay,
Gary,
so
do
let's
you
get
have
this
anything
all
you
out.
need to disclose about this
As a
race?
news reporter, I covered Renee with the Tennessee.
We just
Clean
want to be
Water.
Okay.
up front about
So
everything.
all the
Are we
disclaimers
good?
are out of the
Yeah.
way. Now, Courtney, you can say
Okay.
what you were going to say.
Okay, this race is going to be a really good one for East Tennessee because that seat is open for a very long time. It was held by a Duncan. It was a family dynasty, and now for the first time in a very long time, Tennesseans actually have a choice, and they have a good choice to make. The issue for the Democrat in this race will be the fact that this district was drawn to make sure that a Republican stays in power, so that's a very uphill battle. Also, Tim Burchett is an extraordinarily likable candidate. He got, almost 50% of the vote in a 7-person race. So that's going to be, he's a very formidable opponent, and that's going to be really, really tough to beat. People like Tim Burchett. They don't necessarily gravitate towards him or want to vote for him because of his policy stances. It's because they like him.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. Did you hear anything from Renee Hoyos that's going to slip through and make people choose her over the admittedly very likable Tim Burchett?
Probably, I mean, yes, there will probably be some people that listen to her.
Some, but enough. Yeah.
But I don't think it will be enough. Again, because the genius of the Tim Burchett as a politician is he is extraordinarily likable, and you look at him and he comes across as genuine. You feel like he's going to represent your interests whether you agree with him or not.
Yeah.
And that is extraordinarily difficult to overcome.
And
he really has the charisma down.
He didn't go negative in a very negative campaign.
Right, it was Matlock who
yeah,
went negative.
He stayed above that, so I think that just reinforces what the conception that people have of Tim as being a nice guy. And as another pundit on our show, George Cordo, always says, Tim speaks fluent East Tennessee. He can relate to the people in all areas of this district, which goes from very rural Campbell County, down to Loudoun County, and includes, Knox urban area. So the numbers are working against Renee, but there's healthcare is emerging as quite an issue, and if you care for Trump care, as I call it now, you want to keep that going, then that's something that is going to be a difference between the two candidates.
Gary, size this one up for us.
Well, as Courtney mentioned, the history of that seat, the 2nd Congressional District, the 7 counties it serves, has been strongly Republican for 151 years. It's one of the safest Republican seats in the nation. 1867, Horace Maynard was reelected to Congress, held that seat. Since then, the Republicans, conservatives in this area have chosen to have someone in Congress who's conservative, and we saw that with the 2 Duncans. Now, Mayor Tim Burchett promises to uphold that. The differences I see will be the differences in Republican and Democrat platforms. And when you look at what you're not hearing from Renee Hoyos, is that she's for gun control. She's against weapons of war, she calls them. She's for unlimited immigration. One of the groups that supports her, the Women's March of Tennessee, is anti-Trump, his policies, and they are pro-abortion, as well as they want amnesty for DACA and a pathway to citizenship for illegal aliens.
So you're saying that the national issues are going to trickle down and have a big effect on this race?
Yes. Yes, and we've heard Tim Burchett say he's for building the wall. He's strong supporter of the Second Amendment, NRA endorsement, as well as his fiscal policies. As he's shown, we've not had a property tax increase in the 8 years he's been in office. We're paying down the debt, and I really think there's a clear difference between the two candidates.
Rene Hoyos versus Tim Burchett will be an interesting one to watch. Now, we didn't get the chance last week, pundits, to talk about Glenn Jacobs winning the Knox County mayor's race. That didn't come as a huge shock to anybody, but Glenn Jacobs' status as a pro wrestler did turn this thing into a national, maybe a global headline. The outgoing mayor welcomed him with a reception earlier this week.
It's exciting. You know, Mayor Burchett's done a great job, and I just look forward to doing a great job myself. You know, Knox County is a great place to live, to work, to raise a family, and I think all of us working together can make it even better, and I look forward to helping make that happen.
The key is not the person sitting in that office. The key is the people you surround yourself with, and he's got some first-rate folks. And so I think you've got to. My daddy told me one time before he died, he said, "Buddy, follow the money," and that's what you got to do. You got to manage the money.
You knew he'd bring his daddy into it. I mean, that's classic Tim Burchett right there to Courtney's and everybody's point. You know, okay, but here's the thing with Glenn Jacobs. This guy's like a complete wild card. He has no political history. Nobody knows what he's going to do. I mean, is he as safe? Is he bringing in the good people that Burchett says he is? Craig, I'll start with you.
Well, I think so. I think that he's going to surround himself with the best people that he can. But that is a question. What is he going to do? I mean, he has some libertarian streaks in him. He's a Republican, you know, but libertarian streaks. Will he do anything that radically different in office? Half of the county budget goes to schools. So, you know, he doesn't really have much to do there. But it'll be interesting to see what he does with the rest of the budget and how he's dedicated not to having a property tax increase. So he's going to have the new sheriff-elect, Tom Spangler, tugging at him for more deputies and more equipment. And he's going to have the school system tugging at him for more school security, teacher raises, and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he works through that. And Mark, I want, you know, when you were on last Thursday night on election night, you were eye to eye with Glenn.
Yeah.
You know, that was pretty amazing.
And I'm not 6'8".
You're not 6'8".
I'm 5'7". So yeah, we found a milk crate in the back of the Crown Plaza there. I just didn't want to look, you know, embarrassingly short next to such a tall guy. Man, did he tower over me? Oh, you know, well, you're right. Okay, so the purse strings are limited here. Courtney, one thing I heard him say on election night was that he wants to help tackle the opioid crisis here. So that's another area that hasn't been focused on a lot. I mean, he's going to have to make some hard choices here. He's going to probably learn governing's not as easy as it looks.
He's going to have a very hard lesson. The anxiety with Glenn Jacobs and the politico circles of Knox County is that folks, one, they really don't know who his friends are, and he does have this very, what I would call, academic view of politics. So it's great to be able to recite these theories and application of how libertarian principles would apply to county government, but once you're in that seat, and like Craig said, you got the sheriff pulling at you, you've got law enforcement and public health pulling at you about an opioid crisis, you've got education, and then you have economic developers coming to you and saying, we're going to miss out on these opportunities. How is he going to balance all of that? We don't really know who his friends are. We don't know who his enemies are. So we don't know what we're going to get when Glenn Jacobs takes office. And I think that's causing the most anxiety.
Well, I do know that one of his friends is Gary Lowe. I mean, you know him fairly well. Tell us what we're getting in Glenn Jacobs. We only have about 30 seconds, but yeah, let me know.
Glenn Jacobs is a good guy. He's honest. And I'd say we're good acquaintances. I don't know that we've crossed the threshold to friends, but I trust him. I did a lot of research into his background. There are many videos online that you can see that show where he's coming from. I have met many of the folks involved with his campaign. He's for limited government, lower taxes, and he's talked about ways that we can reduce the cost of operation of county government. And I think that he'll work well with Sheriff-elect, or well,
incoming Sheriff Spangler.
Tom Spangler. We've seen him talk in public already, privately, and I think that it'll be a good match for county residents.
And we will see, because he takes office in September 1st. Hey, still to come, barely a week after Election Day, and the political ads are back already. We talk about that strategy next. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side. And we welcome you back to Tennessee This Week. The conversation continues with Craig Griffith, Courtney Piper, and Gary Lowe. Hey, Election Day is behind us, but political ads remain. You may have noticed this one from Representative Marsha Blackburn, who's running for Senate, of course. We didn't see much of her on the airwaves in the primary. Now she is airing this spot, touting her endorsement by President Trump. The Republican National Committee says the ad's running in every TV market in the state. Meanwhile, her Democratic opponent in that Senate race, Phil Bredesen, has this new ad posted online. It features a series of Republicans, including retiring Senator Bob Corker, who makes up much of the ad, offering praise for the former Tennessee governor. Yeah, okay, panel, let's ask what you think about these strategies, and we'll start with you, Gary. I mean, I'll tell you, this seems like, just, you know, from a 36,000 feet up view, what I would expect both of these candidates to be doing.
Yeah, Mark, we do television production for political candidates, and what Phil Bredesen has done is ingenious. It's important to know, though, that those Republicans in the ad, many of them have come out and endorsed Marsha Blackburn.
Including Corker.
Yeah.
Even though he gushes about Bredesen in that ad.
Yeah.
I think that endorsement was under duress.
Yeah, it was sort of like, well, you know what? It was sort of like the Mike Pence endorsement of Ted Cruz back in the Republican presidential race. It was a very soft, it was almost
or the Mike Pence endorsement of Diane Black in the governor's race.
Which ended up not mattering very much. Right. But so you're saying good strategy makes sense.
Yeah, I think Phil Bredesen has realized he needs to reach across the aisle in order to get elected to the U.S. Senate seat.
Well,
and he does have support locally, as you may have read in the paper. There are several well-known Republicans who are supporting Bredesen. However, I think the Republicans across the state are energized for Marsha because the main driving force is the balance in the Senate, 51-49. There are 47 Democrats, 2 independents.
The seat's a big deal.
And mainly looking at the Supreme Court justice nominees, if the balance shifts to the Democrats, then we'll see a different makeup on the Supreme Court.
Well, Courtney, what strikes me about Bredesen is he never mentions he's a Democrat, and that's, in this race, it's probably smart politics.
Well, I mean, when people go to the polls, they're going to see the D by his name. Whenever
but he's careful to say that both parties aren't getting it done.
When I've seen Governor Bredesen speak, he's always very forthcoming about the fact that he is a Democrat. I mean, he's not keeping that a secret. And the reason why, first of all, I think Governor Bredesen's entire messaging campaign is absolutely brilliant. But going back to that ad where he shows Republicans showing the support for him, Tennessee, historically, statewide, we elect moderate politicians, moderate Republicans, and moderate Democrats. Marsha Blackburn is anything but a moderate. And so,
I think she herself would say
so
that.
Phil Bredesen is going to, historically, what we've seen in this state is we like to elect moderate folks that are going to go, in this case, to the Senate and represent Tennesseans, take good ideas from Republicans, good ideas from Democrats, and get something done. So Bredesen is positioning himself how voters tend to vote in these elections.
Well, and you know, the other thing, too, Craig, is that Phil Bredesen has a record. People liked him as mayor. They liked him as governor. I mean, he's got a record as an executive, even though he's not going for an executive position.
Oh, well, he's run 7 times and lost 3 times. So, you know, he's not unbeatable by any means. And he was the only Democrat in the entire state that could challenge Blackburn. He's the only one that had the name recognition that had to put him there at a position where he's equal. So, you know, again, he's running as a Tennessee Democrat, which is a moderate. You know, so we'll have to see whether that position is, you know, it seems to me I remember that Trump is coming to Nashville for Blackburn either next month or something. So, you know,
he may be here a couple of times.
You know, it could easily be a referendum on Trump in the end. Well, so a lot of his policies and things like that. So Bredesen only won his first race for governor by about 50,000 votes.
And then he crushed it during re-election.
Right. Well, against Van Hillary when he ran, and he, you know, out of 1.6 million, only won by 50,000. Pretty close. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can stay this middle course, if he is pulled to the left by the forces, progressives in the Democratic Party, to have places on, you know, abortion and gun control and doing away with ICE, things like that, it's going to be a difficult race for him.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's it. We could talk a lot more about all this. Thank you, panel. And we will. And if you'd like to watch this show again, you can find it on our website, WATE.com. Hope you'll join us again next Sunday at noon for more Tennessee This Week.